Hello everyone, Revan619 here. How the devil are you? We are not very long away from DLC 3, though we haven't had the official announce date, but I'm hoping we'll get that within the next month, and hopefully within 2 months we should all be doing a fresh new run on DLC 3, which is to do with Trazyn. In this DLC, we are getting an entirely new mechanic based on augmentation. However, we don't appear to be getting a new origin or archetype, though an origin might still appear, though it's been set of the expectations it's unlikely. With that in mind, people might be thinking, well, what sort of build am I going to run for this? Whilst I've covered many builds, so it might seem strange that I'm bringing up a build now, I wanted to go over sort of the iconic Commissar playstyle, because obviously with the return of Yarrick, a lot of people are going to be looking to possibly go into doing that. Whilst Navy Officer is the only origin that supports mixed attacker, which is obviously using melee and range at the same time, so it's, say, a sword and a pistol, there is ways that you can actually create this sort of iconic Commissar playstyle, but it might not be quite as what you were thinking. So let's run through of this. Now, normally most people will tell you to always take, say, a Forge World origin, because you can either take the additional dodge or toughness based on whichever one you go through for one of these 3 upgrades, or they'll tell you to pick Fortress World because you can potentially create additional attacks. However, Fortress World is only really usable if you're doing a lot of extra turn stacking. If you're using your Commissar to be your sort of frontliner and more of your tanky person who, or even just someone that's going to be buffing allies, you're probably not going to be giving many extra turns to him, so maybe you don't use Never Stop Shooting as much. But one thing, if you are going to consider going for a Commissar, because you don't take negatives to Fellowship, Hive World is actually a pretty good one that we can use. And we're actually going to be creating a more tanky upfront warrior. Yes, as your main buffer, you do want to be agility focused, but you can't do everything. So I'm going to suggest that we take a Hive World here. Origin, as I've stated, we are going to go for that dapper Commissar look, and this gives us access to at all costs, which is one of the strongest buffs in the game. It will apply damage to just about everything. I can see this eventually getting nerfed, and it's one of the few origins outside of Psyker that isn't once per combat. Iconic Sidearm is also why we're going to want to go here, because even though we're going to be playing a warrior, we can turn Ballistic Skill and Fellowship into extra damage, which is going to be really good, especially because we're not going to have access to those soldier talents to make that gun usable. And the characteristic modifiers that we're going to see coming in here with Ballistic Skill and Fellowship is also going to be pretty nice with everything else on top. As I said, we are picking Warrior, and that's mostly going to be around this charge feature. Being able to have charge means that we will be able to set up to chain a lot of extra attacks through charge, and also reducing the cost of our burst fires to 1 AP. I'm going to explain more how we're going to take into consideration applying those Commissar buffs without one-shotting allies. On the characteristic side, we're actually going to start by focusing on weapon skill. We're going to put 1 point into strength to begin with. We're going to get 1 into agility just so we can hit that break point, and the other 2 points we're going to put into toughness. We are going to be taking 2 different strength level ups because we are going to want to hit this to 45 to be able to get into heavy and power armor, depending on which you want to go with. Though with the power armor update, power armor is actually very recommended these days. Strength can take care of itself in the early game because you have access to Iron Arm from Heinrichs, and in the late game we're going to take peak condition in Exemplar, which is literally going to turn everything we invest into toughness straight into strength. And we are also going to be taking broad expertise, which is going to turn our excess weapon skill, and it's going to boost up our ballistic skill. And because we're going to play an Arch-militant, these two will look after each other. That's the only way to do mixed attacker, because you need weapon skill not only to lower enemies parry to hit, excess weapon skill also becomes crit chance. Same ballistic skill, you need up to 65 to land a shot on an enemy, with excess becoming crit chance. Burst fire might be auto hit, and there are some items that you can get for auto hit for single shot. However, to make it worthwhile, we want to be using those burst fires, and we're going to be wanting to crit. So when you come across to the next screen, one of the things we're going to focus on as we level up is going to be athletics, because chances are using a warrior means you're going to not be having Abelard in the party. Yes, I know people are going to be very upset about it, but we can't lock out an entire archetype just because in Act 1 Abelard introduces us. The other one we're actually going to need to put a little bit of focus into is actually coercion, because this will tie into the buffs that we provide with at all costs. So at all costs will actually give us buffs based on coercion to characteristics. So the more go going in there is going to be useful. The reason we don't need to worry too much about Fellowship is Fellowship can actually be very well looked after if you go any points into Iconoclast from talent rewards as well as items. It's actually one of the most supported stats in the game, so you don't have to worry about it as much as you would others. There are some other little strategies that we could do where you could turn Law Imperium to scale from Fellowship, and if you really stack items there, you can actually get a lot of extra armor coming in, but that's not a strategy I'm going to be using in this build, and if you are interested in that, do look at my meta build strategies where I did go over how to use that. That is something you can apply here, and if you do want to do it, I'll leave that for your creation to add that yourself. So let's check in on how this build is going to look. Now, I've got two weapon sets here. In the primary set is going to be the Foe Hammer, which is what we're going to focus on, and in the secondary set, it's going to be the Ripper. Now, the reason for this is, when we apply our Commissar buffs, we don't really want to hurt our allies that much, so we want a low damage but high rate of fire weapon. As you can see, the Ripper Autopisto here, because of some of our stats, has a rate of fire of 9, so we can use either of these as our main weapon and switch around for our secondary. Early on, the Noble Sword's going to be our first choice of weapon because we'll be able to apply Disturbed on those charges. Now, there is going to be a slight funny little thing happening here, which is weapon personalization is actually going to apply from having the main hand Foe Hammer, so our arm penetration is actually going to be increased on our melee weapons in the offhand, and the same will be true for our offhand Chainsword here, which is going to have 20. The Ripper is going to be your strongest one for burst fires because of that really high to hit. That really high rate of fire, whereas the Foe Hammer is going to be useful for taking out areas of enemies. You will be able to quite easily charge and either make the sort of 1 AP area attack to knock things back, and this will stack with crowd kill. The reason that the Foe Hammer is in the main hand is because for each enemy that's inside that AoE, we'll get extra strength modifier applied to the enemies, so that can build up quite nicely. If, however, it is just a single target, then you're going to want to go for that burst fire. Early on, our hit chance is only going to be at 40 instead of the desired 65, and our perception is only 35, but we are getting extra dodge reduction coming in from the fact that we are a Commissar. Though at the start it's not going to be the highest, it will increase as we go later on. You can either go for one of the medium armors or you can go for one of the light armors like the flak armor here. This is mostly so we get the extra agility. The extra agility coming in with the Von Valancius cloak will help us go first in the initiative order. So your agility modifier, which is 5 here, will get half of your perception, which is only going to really be a 1.5. So probably only be a 6 coming in here, but that will add on to the D10 roll. So this will help us going first. Helm Determination, if you go the Iconoclast route, will allow us to get extra armor and extra fellowship. Because this is a mercenary, the amount that I can have is limited, but you'll actually be seeing more benefit yourself when you're using it. There's not too many other items that are going to be quite useful. The Pneumo Boots are going to be very good for getting the charge cost down to 1 AP, and stuff like First Aid Manual will be very helpful for reducing the cost of Medicaid to be able to survive. And if you've done a Grim Darkness run, you can use the Amulet of Indomitable Spirit to keep yourself alive. I've only got the Avenger Gauntlets on here because there's not much better that we can use, but other stuff that we can find later. But this can be useful if you're up front and enemies try to move away from you, because that will apply to your attack of opportunity. So let's actually have a look at what we've leveled here. Starting off, you get charge, and the first rank that I take is Medicaid. The Medicaid is so we have access to Medicaid kits, which is going to be very useful for the Chaos Spawn, especially on an unfair. Endure adds deflection, but deflection is not really the best defensive mitigation. Armor is by far more efficient. Armor reduces the total damage that you take by a percentage, whereas deflection will actually only reduce flat damage before anything coming in. So if an enemy does 20 damage and you have 2 deflection, you lower it by 2. But if you have 90% armor, which is the cap, you'll actually only take 10% of the damage. So if they did 20, they would only do 2. However, that reduction also applies to your deflection. So say you were deflecting 10, but you had a 90% armor, you'd actually, deflection would be reduced to just 1. So the effective use of the deflection is also decreased. At rank 4, we take Daring Breach and we take Thick Skin. Thick Skin in the troll fight, you're probably going to want to use medium armor so you can get some extra deflection here because you're not going to be able to dodge the Chaos Spawn. But what it does is it gives 1 base deflection, but the reason we take this is it turns our armor into parry chance. This is very good to stack with Dueling Mastery, and as you get power armor in the late game, this talent will explode in value. One of the good ones to get if we're going to be using Foe Hammers is Crowd Kill. Area attacks deal initial 3 damage for each enemy in the area of effect. So if you're using a melee that hits 3 and there's 3 in there, you'll get 3 times. However, if you're using an area weapon and you're hitting 5 people, that'll be 5 times your strength modifier. That's going to apply to damage to everyone. We're going to focus on weapon skill at first, and at rank 6 I like to pick up Forceful Strike, though you could go for Reckless Strike early. You can switch them around. We're not going to be going for Taunting Scream because we don't really want enemies to be forcefully targeting us. Having them move away from us so we can get those attacks opportunities is actually going to be another way that we can get in some extra damage. I take athletics first because there's some good athletic checks that you'll need to take. You will have Abelard at the start, but you will eventually losing him, so it's going to be good to have some investment there. Rank 7, get some more weapon skill because obviously that reduces enemies' parry and gives us crit chance as we build up. More dueling mastery so we can just become a beast in one-to-one combat. Take more athletics. Impetus then comes in because again, extra strength and toughness bonuses to our charge when we go from a distance of 5 more cells is going to be very useful here. Daring Breach, the upgrade 2, is probably the best one in the game for it because that means kills gives us MP and we don't spend MP to attack. At rank 10, we're going to take Opening Strike. Charge and Push increases the damage of ranged attacks made against effective enemies by 10% until the end of combat. Does not stack. This means if you charge in and hit a chap with it and then you do your Foe Hammer or even your Ripper Burst Fire, they take 10% extra damage. Very good, very strong, and that will scale into the late game. Rank 10, we're also going to take a strength increase. This is going to get us up to that +4 at 40, and we're going to be looking forward to building this up to be able to get the requirements for heavy armor for Act 3 or power armor. Rank 11, we get Reckless Strike. This is just a big damage increase that is very good if you do a area attack and you hit many enemies, or even just going for a single target. Weapon personalization is fantastic here. All ranged weapons in physical damage have +1 damage, 5% arm penetration, and +1 rate of fire, and -5 recall. The damage buffs there for that +1 damage and +5 arm penetration will apply to an offhand melee weapon if your primary hand is a pistol. So this is doubly useful for us. Rank 12, we start taking toughness because we're going to want to survive, and we're going to start building HP to eventually use for peak condition, which is a fantastic way to convert HP into strength in the late game. We take coercion because it's going to tie in with our fellowship increases that we're going to take as we play through, and it's also going to be quite useful for our Commissar buffs. We take ramming speed because in Act 2 we're going to find a sword that's going to allow us to chain charges, so this is actually going to be incredibly important to have that extra distance to make it more useful. Take some more coercion. Rank 14, we get toughness because you can only increase the stat by 2, which is why we're going to want to put this in toughness. You could go the agility route, but the reason we're going for toughness is because that we're planning to be quite tanky by Act 3. This is then a really important upgrade, which is Summary Execution. When the Commissar uses at all costs while shooting from behind, this bonus grants to effect are doubled. So you can double the buffs that you're applying to allies, which will increase their damage, it will increase their stats, and is incredibly useful. And like I said, you want to be using this from the Ripper pistol because you ignore allies' armor, and all of your modifiers do get applied to this when you're doing that shot to your allies' back, so you don't want to one-shot them. Stuff that you can get later, like Invigorating Resolve, will definitely help prevent you from killing your allies. For the final upgrade, we're going to take Daring Breach 4, and this turn, melee attacks deal additional strength damage, so yeah, it's just good to get the extra stack there. That's going to increase as we go up throughout the game, but for now, this is going to be a very good basis. Rank 2, well, should I say tier 2 for your archetypes is when you're going to start seeing more of the mixed attacks go online, so we'll start looking at that next. By the end of Act 2, you should be around level 35 thanks to the DLCs and about to be ready to go into Act 3. And as you can see, the build has progressed since then. Now, I'm still using the Helm of Determination because as your Iconoclast rank increases, so does what it offers. So you get extra armor and you get extra fellowship, though the extra fellowship is going to be doing a little bit less than what it would have offered. But as you can see, we are actually getting a lot of bonuses to fellowship from just picking up bonuses going out throughout the game. Bestow of Freedom will give us fellowship based on Iconoclast rank, and because I've reached rank 3, we're getting quite a little bit there. Master of Shadow Expanse and Janus Warlord will also give in some good increases there, though you'll have to ignore Blessing of St. Cognatius because that comes from Act 4, and unfortunately I'm showing off this build in Act 4, so I'm getting those benefits coming in. As for items, I've upgraded to the Deathworld Origin Enforcers like Carapace because it does give a nice agility boost, which is still useful for getting that early initiative. initiative, though we're getting ready to swap over to power armor. Coming in over here, we've got the invigorating resolve on here, which is as we get kills, we get temporary HP, which will then stack with the Malpain Shroud, which we will use better than Abelard can to do extra damage based on that. Other items, we're still using the Pneumo Boots, but now we're able to combine that with Epiphany. This is a very unique sword that when you kill an enemy with a charge, charge has no cooldown, so per AP you can make lots and lots of charges, and they'll all be 1 AP cost. So as you can see, this is going to stack very nicely, and as you can see that we are getting a lot of benefits coming in here, because at the moment we are seeing 55% armor penetration based on talents, Hive World, and some other abilities that we've picked up going throughout the quest lines and colony rewards. Items that we've also put on here is Knuckle Guard. You can only get the Knuckle Guard if you go incognito to Footfall, so keep that in mind. And I'm also using the hand pattern data loom just to help out with some athletics checks and to get our coercion up a little bit, though you could easily swap this one out. This is just for preference. In the secondary slot, I'm using the Mazzaro pattern auto pistol. This has a 7 ray of fire. It is a damage upgrade to the Ripper, but you have to be careful here because you are starting to increase damage for what you do to allies, and you don't need to worry about that armor pen because obviously you'll ignore those stats for enemies. Secondary, I've just got Wrath of the Vile Rabble. You can have a different secondary weapon in there because it's more about having the Epiphany, and it's what we're going to be working around. Don't need to use Chain X. I just thought it looked cool. That's the only reason I've got it in there. You can pick something else for this, but this will start progressing you throughout the act, and at this point you'll start finding, as long as you have a Grand Strategist Officer, that nothing can touch you in combat. As you can see, we've got exceptional weapon skill. This will give a pretty big bit of boost, so this will give plus 16 entering combat to our ballistic skill, so our ballistic skill will actually be at a 61, and that's before we even start applying versatility. We'll have a minimum of 2 in combat, so that's going to be another 6 on top of that, so we're already over the 65 ballistic skill. So every time we hit something, we're just going to be increasing that to have more opportunities to crit on our enemies. And because we're also an Arch-militant now, we're going to stack that up a lot. So looking at Arch-militant, we start off by gaining versatility. What this does is when we switch attack types, we from say single to area, or say single melee to single range, or even burst fire to single shot, and vice versa, we gain a stacking plus 3 to weapon skill and ballistic skill, which is pretty good in itself. And from once we have 4 stacks, the Arch-militant deals additional 10 plus weapon skill bonus percentage or ballistic skill bonus percentage, whichever is highest, additional damage. If we go back to our features here, one thing that we also need to keep in mind is, because we are a Commissar using Iconic Sidearm, shots with a pistol in their primary hand deal 8% more damage and gain 15% critical chance and 14% dodge reduction. So we are actually funneling those additional ballistic skill bonuses and fellowship bonuses into our pistols. The first ability I take is Reckless Rush because it gives us extra MP, and if we already have versatility, we get 3 more stacks of versatility. This is going to be very beneficial later and has a very strong upgrade. To make sure that we have those initial stacks before we even attack enemy, we take Always Ready, so we start off with 2, so we have 5 stacks immediately and get in extra MP. Steady Superiority is the Heroic, which can give us an additional attack when we pop that. It's not as good as Daring Breach, which can generate an entire fresh turn and generate MP on kill, but it's still pretty useful, and we can use both as a Arch-militant. Rank 5, we get the AP increase and we start increasing our weapon skill. Rank 6 is obviously when we take that broad expertise, and as I said, we'll get 8 extra weapon skill and 16 ballistic skill just by going into combat, which is a really good boost for both of them. We will then get Wildfire at rank 7. The reason we don't prioritize this straight away is movement is more important, and building up that versatility is going to be required to lower the cost from 3 AP to 1 AP. So for every 4 we will get a 1 AP cost reduction, so we'll be starting on that initial charge as a 6, so that will be 2 AP, and once we've done 2 attacks that will drop down to a 1 AP, but it's going to be much easier to build that once we get a few more talents, and I'll talk about them as we get them. We pick up Athletics because we're going to want those skill checks to get up there. We get All Out, so whilst the Arch-militant is under the effects of Reckless Rush, their attacks do not cost MP, one of the strongest talents in the entire game. Rank 9, we pick in some Toughness, and we get Power Weapon Expert. This is why we have so much armor penetration. Unfortunately, excess armor penetration doesn't do much, but it's going to help against bosses that have really high armor. Rank 10, we take Flash Fire, which changes that minus on Wildfire from 4 to 3, so we start getting those 1 AP extra attacks very easily. We take in some more Athletics. We start building up some more Toughness. Again, this is going to be important for later. We get the upgrade upgrade number 4. The Arch-militant can use both heroic attacks with the Arch-militant warrior and Arch-militant, so this very good upgrade, so we can use Dare and Breach, and in later turns we can use Steady Superiority. We pick up more Coercion, because that's obviously going to tie into our buffs for the Commissar, but we also get Arms Master. Killing an enemy with a melee attack makes all the Arch-militant's ranged weapon attacks this turn cost 1 AP less, minimum 1, and vice versa, does not stack. This means if we kill someone with charge, we can do 1 AP burst fires. It means if we've already done a melee and our off-hand foe hammer would have cost 2 AP, it now only costs 1 AP still. So this is going to be very useful for reducing costs and helping us to have as many attacks as possible. We get the strength increase to get that base 45, which we're going to need for power arm efficiency, and we also take characteristic training perception. We need this to be able to enhance our perception. Next ability I take is Kick. It's an extra attack, and with the upgrade Martial Arts we take it next level. It does give a chance to knock down enemies, and it is another way to build versatility if we're swapping between burst fire, area fire, and other sort of attack types. So yes, Martial Arts coming in there can also knock enemies prone if they fail the test. We're going to get some more perception. We're going to take in some more coercion. We're going to get in adaptability here. We're going to get into more perception, and then we get camaraderie. The reason we take camaraderie is for some of the Act 3 checks, which means that we can, instead of taking willpower checks, we do it from fellowship. Something that is also going to be quite helpful is on that rank 7 with taking dual weapon combat, because now that that is stacked with Arms Master, like I said, it reduces the additional increase to the offhand attacks. Because when you take that offhand attack, you lose 20 weapon or ballistic skill, and it costs 1 AP more. Versatility will offset that reduction, but to keep that extra AP cost down, Arms Master is going to be very helpful. So as long as you're killing, you're going to be doing a lot more. And you're also, if you're killing on charge, you're going to be chaining a lot of charges. So you can really take out a lot of trash mobs. And if you've got a lot of them stacked up, you can apply a lot of strength bonus to all of them in one area from the foe hammer. Though if it's just a single enemy, you go for that burst fire. It's up to you which you want to engage with. We don't quite have the strength yet for strength to vastly outclass the burst fire, but we will be getting that into Exemplar. So we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about Exemplar next. Act 3 to Act 5 will see some really big increases with a lot of new toys coming in Act 3. In Act 3, we'll also get our Commissar's cap, so we can have that iconic look back, and it will also give us extra critical chance to the party, as well as enhancing our fellowship. In this act, we'll also get access to our first power armor, which is the Adherent of Mankind. Going into Act 3, because the party gets split for some story reasons, being tanky yourself is very beneficial in some of these encounters. Towards the end of Act 3, you'll also find the Iron Eye Cape, which will further increase agility and fellowship. 2 of the really good upgrades. Now, what this will allow us to do is, along with all of our other sources here, we get a lot of stacks to fellowship. Whilst we've not invested many other than 2 points in Exemplar, we've actually got incredibly high fellowship that's kept up with both our weapon skill and our strength and even our toughness. We are seeing massive increases to our playstyle here, and you'll see a lot more damage. Unfortunately, on a warrior Act 5, you will see a lot of drop off to your area weapons, but it's still going to be very effective, and your melee is going to be unmatched, because when you get into Act 4, straight away in Act 4, you can get access to the Terran Vengeance by going to the Shrine World. And this axe does extra strength and toughness bonus, so it will have incredibly high base damage coming in here, and with more buffs, you'll increase that even more. Your armor penetration is through the roof at this point, and you'll also have access to things like Destroyer, which will strip enemy armor based on your toughness. And then when you pick up something like the Arbitrary's Underarm Foe Hammer, you can get free attacks based on getting some kills. So obviously with dual weapon combat, access Dare and Breach, you're going to be doing a lot. Your main buff tool, depending on how you go in the storylines, you will get access to the Daredevil pistol, which again, low base damage, but very high rate of fire, so very strong for your burst attacks. Secondary weapon for that set is going to be up to you. I like to use stuff like the Bonebreaker Maul because I like stuff like Harsh Shove, and I like getting those extra opportunities to inflict traumas, but debuffs don't really matter when you can just one-shot and kill things. On here at the moment, I've got Bead of Might. I actually delayed Eager for battle rather than taking it first, because a lot of people that look at the builds always complain that I take Eager for battle early. I can guarantee you are less effective by having 2 less AP, but for those who obviously complain about that, we've actually switched things up. So Bead of Might will actually be less useful early on. You'll have to wait until higher levels to be able to get use of it. You will in Act 4 get access to the Void Veteran Boots, which will just make your charges insane, because every time you get a melee kill, you get free charges. And you can either stick with Invigorating Resolve and Malpain Shroud, or you can progress these to stuff like the Arch-militant Cape, which will allow your crits from your Daredevil pistol to stack an obscene amount of strength. Less valuable than if you're using that setup with a Navy officer, but still very strong here. It's up to you which you want to go for, but this Malpain Shroud Invigorating Resolve requires less thinking, so that's the build I felt like I would present. Adherent of Mankind also gives you not only just a big strength boost, but another plus 10 to all characteristics. So you actually get plus 30 going into strength from Adherent from Mankind. So yes, the benefits that you are seeing here are just absolutely exquisite. If we move over to look onto these builds, we can go through what we're changing in these Exemplar ranks. So going in straight away, we're getting peak condition, which is going to turn our HP into strength bonus, so we will get a big power creep there. We pick up easy for target, so the warrior's critical damage is increased by strength bonus against enemies not armed with a melee weapon. This will apply to your ranged weapons as well, so it's a big boost there. More athletics, critical versatility, so we get even more crit damage as we're building up versatility stacks, which is very potent. We'll get power armor efficiency fairly early, and the reason for this is to get that power armor in Act 3, along with starting to increase our weapon skill. Sword enemy is going to help us be a boss killer because we gain extra armor against a marked target, we'll do extra damage, and if the warrior during this round, the warrior gains plus 1 AP if the target attacks you. So if they somehow go first later, then yeah, that's pretty good, though that part of the effect you won't often see. More athletic, degrade defense comes in, which is the strongest damage increase in the game. For every 6 points of damage you do, you get an additional base 1 damage. This has 1,000 cap, so 1,000 divided by 6, so extra damage. Huge. This is talent's absolutely game breaking. You always want this on a damage build, and even support builds can use that because the whole party can use that stacks. It works like a debuff. Picking up dismantle, because it will start reducing enemies' armor and deflection, but having those reductions will allow us to get some other increases, and it will prime some of our militant talents. You could also take distract here instead if you really wanted to, if you're focusing more on the burst fire. More weapon skill. Open engagement is good for that first hit, so that first charge, if you go over 5 cells, will absolutely annihilate one enemy for your first attack in combat. Devastating attack is really good here because depending on what damage you're going for, you get a lot of extra effects. So if you're using your burst pistol, you'll do impact damage, same if you're using your maul, which could knock the enemy prone. If you go for piercing, which is going to be something more like your burst weapons here, or rending damage, which is going to be your axes, yeah, you'll inflict a bleeding and slowed on the target to the end of combat. We won't really be doing energy damage, so we won't really be applying blinded, but for other builds they will have access to that. We're going to get more toughness. Breaking attack will further reduce enemies' toughness, which reduces their HP and their armor. So already we're starting to see some big armor strip, as long with our huge arm penetration, which means that not many enemies are going to survive us. We take Let Them Know Fear. Whilst the Commissar is adjacent to an enemy, all allies gain 6 resolve. This includes yourself. If there are no creatures in a 2-cell radius, Commissar gains 6 resolve. So yeah, extra resolve is going to be very good. It just means that we're going to get more heroics more quick. We're going to take in some more coercion, which goes into those Commissar bonuses. We get Destroyer, so we will, each melee attack will armor strip, and this does stack. So eventually you'll just see all enemies at 0 armor, so they'll take exceptional damage, and combining that with degrade defense, huge. Pick up Contempt. This is going to be less valuable, and it's just going to be sort of a filler because these late end talents aren't going to be the best. Coercion coming in because we also want to increase that, but as you can see, for a non-fellowship increasing build, to have 194 by endgame is pretty huge. Living Shield, not going to be too many encounters which is useful, but maybe Deals 3 had some extra challenges where we can see some use out of this. Medicaid we're only really taking because we've got nothing left to increase. There are no other skills that we really need. You can pop these 3 levels in Medicaid to anything else that you'd want. Exploit Weakness is going to increase our damage coming in from our Arch-militant, so we have a lot of ways to prime these talents. Do read more if you want to know that. That is going to be linked below in the spreadsheet, and this is the iconic Commissar if you want to follow along on the spreadsheet. More Toughness. We then start increasing Fellowship because we don't really need more Perception at this point in the game because we've already got 22 dodge reduction coming in on our pistols from our Commissar. We're getting more Medicaid. Eagle of Bow plus 2 AP in the first turn of combat is huge. This will apply to Finest Hour, this will apply to your main turn, and it will apply to Daring Breach. So that's essentially 6 extra AP in turn 1. That's a very big buff. Desolation, this will turn our melee damage to increase with agility, and if we're receiving buffs from allies, stuff like voice of command or even warp speed, yep, that will do even more. I take it a little bit late. You could bring this up earlier to where I took Contempt instead if you really want to. Contempt for the Weak is going to be another critical damage against stunned, prone or blind enemies, and we have many ways to do that now. More Medicaid. Preferred Targets is another good one. If we're reducing enemies' dodge or if we're reducing their parry, we get extra damages coming in. Motivation, yeah, we're going to get even more MP. You're going to be zooming around this battlefield. This is going to be the Commissar that is all up in there. This man's going to be a legendary duelist. Breakthrough is what we take last because we start getting agility towards the end of the game. More agility means the more additional attacks we can do this. And if you're using Void Veteran Boots, it will proc up your charges, so you don't need to worry about this cancelling it out for the turn. More Fellowship, and at the end we take Extermination and Blade Fury, so each of those charges and every attack, yeah, we start increasing damage more. Extermination is fairly low priority because it builds up very slowly, and everything else when combined with that is going to be exceptional. But that's going to do it for the build. This is going to be the iconic Commissar, and this is going to be an incredibly powerful and potent build. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, do leave a like below and let me know in the comment section what you're planning to run for DLC 3. I'm quite keen to hear what people want to run because I don't know out of my 50 plus builds what I want to run, and I'm sure that we're all looking forward to seeing what the augmentation system will change. But that's all I've got for you today. Bye for now. I've been Rev619, and as always, it's been a pleasure to have you here.